sweet sounds of lo-fi. Perhaps they can help me chill because something happened that hasn't really happened in most of my episodes till now. Which episode am I in? Like 50, I think, or something. Well, the thing that happened was that I was keen on like letting it rip for this movie, for my Spanish version, for my Spanish episode. And I did. I let it rant out. And, this is a movie that to me evokes that ranting spirit. It just does. But what I'm gonna do is to try to make it more sensible for the English version. This will be a new exercise. So, this year, the latest Disney Pixar movie called Hoppers was a great hit for both critics and viewers. Made a lot of money, or like a decent amount of money, compared to the previous outing, Elio, right? A movie which barely broke even. So that piqued my attention, of course, but not only because of that, but because I am a fan of Disney Pixar in general. Well, this immediately conditioned my viewing of the movie, without knowing nothing but that it was a success or critically praised. So, what is Hoppers about? Hoppers is about this girl who wants to save a glade, because in that glade she used to spend a lot of time with her grandmother. She is supposedly an animal, kind of an activist. See, you already stumble into into like a big question right out of the bat, or right out of the way. You say you're not gonna rant, but immediately when you try to be as specific as possible, or like as contained as possible, you run into the first issue. Is she an animal activist? Is she a nature? I don't know. The only thing we know is that she wants to save this glade, apparently against anything and everything. Later in the movie, we learn that she's actually a college student. Do they tell us her major or something? I'm not sure, but let's assume it's something related to nature, since she seems to be obsessed with it. So, Hoppers is about this nature-obsessed college student who wants to save a glade, with the apparent excuse that is to save the nature of it, or the ecosystem, the small ecosystem that lived in that glade, where she would spend a lot of time with her grandmother. What does she want to save the glade from? Is the city's major highway, which for those of you who have been to Tokyo, it's kind of like the Yamanote line. I think that was the name. It's basically you take a big urban city and you draw a circle around it. So this is like a great connectivity plan. For example, the subway in Tokyo works like that. You have a big ring around the city, and that line sort of connects everything. You can go through that hoop and get off in that point, get off in this point, and go through this tangent, and go it's a great plan in general. So he wants to do that, and to finish that, because apparently he has 99% of it constructed. To finish it, he needs to put the last piece on top of this glade. To do so, without, bear in mind, without just killing or forcibly displacing the animals, he secretly installs some sort of audio tower thingy. These are like speakers that emit sound or frequencies that sort of affect the animals, so they make them leave that place so they can build the highway. So she wants to stop this, and to do that, she discovers that her professor at the university, for some weird ass reason, discovered a way to transport a human consciousness into a robot mode, which immediately brought the comparisons with so many other movies like that, but the recent more famous one being Avatar, James Cameron's Avatar, with the blue fish things. The teacher originally had built this invention, or had made this creation, to understand animals. You know, we have like the Jane Goodalls and like whatever this guy who died recently that narrated nature. We know that to learn about nature, we have to observe it. We need to observe it without interrupting it, without manipulating it, because nature and ecosystems are a fragile thing. Everything inside of an ecosystem, no matter how big or small it is, works sort of like a clock. You know, every cog inside of this machine has its purpose. That's why nature is so awesome, and the animal kingdom, that's why it's so cool as well, because everyone has a role in it, from the smallest bug to the biggest elephant, hippopotamus, or whatever you want to call it. You don't mess with the natural order. So nature has ways of adapting itself, and even if you intervene it has like a breaking point. I'm pretty sure there's a scientific term, but these sort of ecosystems, they can stretch themselves all the way to a breaking point. Like you can increase or reduce the population in it to a certain degree, like sometimes get a new species in it, change the temperature. Everything has a breaking point. But okay, back to the movie. So the main character, I forgot her name already, she like steals or like kidnaps, but he hijacks. That's a good word. She hijacks one of these robots to become a beaver and influence the animals that used to live in that glade that now live elsewhere. At no point in the movie they imply that they are living in a wrong place, or like in a place that is bad for them, or even a place they dislike. So she goes there and intervenes, convincing them to come back, to quote unquote take back their home. Against that, she discovers that animals actually have a hierarchy and a system. Of course, this is anthropomorphized animals. They all have a system and a hierarchy which decides what they do or not, with their ups and downs. With the ups and downs. I was meaning to say like with the comings and goings. So she convinces them to take back the glade. And of course hijinks ensue. They face the bad guy and they defeat the bad guy, the first bad guy, and everybody lives happily ever after, because they find a way to bring back the glade and to relocate the highway. Wow, sounds super clean, right? Perfect clean movie. Then you go to the reviews and they go like, Pixar is back in form. This movie is so charming and like so full of heart. And okay, I watched the movie and I shit you not, this must be one of the most triggering Pixar movies ever. So, as I said, I don't want to rant. So let's focus this one criticism in just this one big question for me. Is this movie about nature at all? We already heard the whole plot of the movie. Is this movie about nature at all? Does the protagonist know anything about animals at all? This is something that really bothered me, because I'm watching this movie and I'm trying to look through all of its classic trope-filled Disney Pixar movie, like the comedy, the funny characters, which is all good and well, right? Funny characters, whatever. I'm trying to look for it's not context, it's substance. I'm trying to look for substance for a movie that is trying to defend nature, animals, and the general ecosystem of not just the world. I'm assuming this little glade is a metaphor for the rest of the world, isn't it? But the more I challenge the movie, the more I try to find this substance, the less of it you find. And this is kind of like I don't mean to be dramatic, but it kind of is. So if you want to start somewhere, start with the main character, who is so dumb. Sorry to say it like that, but isn't she supposed to be a college student? I'm assuming she's studying something about nature. Isn't she an animal fan? Then how come she doesn't know shit of what she's doing? Like, this was so annoying to watch, because she would go into the robot beaver, insert herself into this ecosystem, and just try, like, just do stuff without a care in the world. And her teacher would talk to her through, like, the ear thing, the headphone, the earphone, whatever. Like, they would talk to her like, don't interrupt nature, just observe. But this dumb fucking kid, she does the total opposite. And that is the source of all of my frustration. Because, as I said, I'm looking for a substance. I'm looking for the core message of this movie being like a pro-environment animal movie. But how can that be when the protagonist is such a dumb person? She just wants to save this glade against all odds, interfering, manipulating, lying. And this is the one scene and the one part of the movie that needs to be spoiled to understand how frustrating this movie is. When she is in her beaver mode, as I said, she discovers this, is it a microsystem? But this small ecosystem of animals, they have a hierarchy. They have kind of like small kingdoms for all of them. So you have the amphibians, you have the insects, you have the birds, and I think the beaver king is like the mammal king. So they have this big meeting, like a council, to kind of like decide if they want to retake this glade. So when all the royalties, the kings and queens, come together, the insect queen, of like understandably so, gets super pissed at the fact that the humans are destroying this ecosystem, even though they have moved on, right? Like, if the main character hadn't interfered or forced them to think this, they wouldn't have to do so. But she naturally gets really angry at the humans taking their glade, and she gets in the face of the main character, like, yeah, we're gonna do this, just like in the heat of the moment, they're arguing. And spoiler alert, she fucking kills the queen of the bugs. She swatted, like, this is one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen in a Pixar movie, because is this fucking kid Isn't she supposed to be an animal activist? Isn't she trying to save an ecosystem? You know, as an animal person, one of the hardest things you can try to do, or you can work on yourself to do, is to appreciate insects, because these creepy crawlies are never, to me, they're never pretty. They are like disgusting, creepy, slimy. You gotta force yourself to just not kill all of the bugs. If you are a person who is interested in the natural world, ecosystem, and animals in general, you know that despite all of that, they matter. The fact that she swats this bug made me so fucking angry. Because who is this kid? Like, who the fuck is she? And how can I find a nature-loving person substance, or like how can we call this alleged substance of the movie that I'm looking for? This pro-ecology, like, let's call it pro-animal. This pro-animal substance. How can that be a part of this movie when the main character kills a bug in front of her son? Out of all people. Now, this is when you get awakened. You get your eyes open. And you realize right there, this is like maybe half of the movie. You realize that this movie doesn't give a shit about nature or animals. You realize that this Pixar movie is just a really well crafted, almost Machiavellian, trope filled product. I think that is the word. Before this, like all of the best Pixar movies, they don't feel like products. They feel like emotion and poetry and feelings. Like just the latest one, like Inside Out, Coco, even Elio, as I mentioned before. They are always about feelings. This is really human, deep connections. But Hoppers is nothing like that. When you hear and when you saw the trailers and sort of hear the overarching, like the big picture of it, you think it's gonna be about that. You think the emotion of the movie is gonna be in the connection between humans and animals. They go into the android bodies to try to understand animals, and because she cares for them. But she's not doing it for that. She only wants to save her glade for her own sanity, for her own emotional stability, which is fucked. They heavily imply that she is a weird kid, doesn't have many friends, whatever, and she emotionally depended on her grandma and that plot. They even show her her parents leaving and she staying behind just because that was where her grandma was. But none of that really develops through this plot of manipulating animals. For example, in Elio again, Elliot goes through all of this adventure because he's genuinely lacking emotional connection. He really is. So at each step of Elio, you see him grasping for connection. You see him grasping for emotions. You see him grasping for warmth and acceptance. So the movie works in that way. But here, the main character is this kind of like a manipulative person. She just wants an objective, which is save the glade, and for that she is up to manipulating or being super selfish and just ignoring everyone. This is where the movie gets so fucking weird, because as I said, I was looking for an essence of a pro nature, pro animal movie, but then it all gets really trope heavy into what a movie is supposed to be. They do that by making animals bad, which is another thing that triggers me and makes me so fucking angry. If you have movies, for example, A Bug's Life, and or you have a context where every character is an insect or every character is an animal, Lion King or whatever, right? Every character in there needs to fulfill a certain role for the dramatic events to happen. So inside the Lion King, for example, it's understandable that Scar is probably bad because there are no more characters in the movie. There are like no humans. But here they do have humans. And they did the unthinkable, which is to be able to understand animals. And I really find it so strange that they chose some animals to be quote unquote bad, to be resentful, to give them bad and ill-intended emotions. In this context, it's so fucking weird because no human has that. The other kind of like the human antagonist, him being the mayor of town, is shown as this really well-intended guy. He just wants the best for the city. He cares for his aging mother. He's an explicit good guy. The only thing he lacks is the capacity to understand animals, which they achieved. This is third thing that just pisses me off. They discovered a way of communicating with animals and reaching an understanding, but apparently everybody hates that thing. This is something so stupid. Like, this is so fucking stupid. Like, in which reality an academic on your school or university makes this level of discovery and gets shunned by the people on top? In which reality? In which reality there are not deans, companies, private interests trying to finance the shit out of this and make it a useful tool? In which reality? In which reality that doesn't happen? Even by the end of the movie, they said that they were forced to move on this technology. Dude, you basically made it possible for humans and animals to talk to each other and understand each other. You're fucking telling me that nobody wants that. You're fucking telling me that there's no way for you to profit even out of that. That's why you're telling me that it had to be a secret? Like, this kid could have gone, okay, I'm gonna use this technology to show politicians in charge that animals actually care for this glade. They care for it, they wanna be there, and therefore it would prove something that we vegetarians and vegans have been professing for years. That animals have self-worth, that they matter. That even if we don't grant them consciousness in the traditional sense or anything, we need to acknowledge them. But what does this movie does? It shows that if animals were to have consciousness, they would be as much of an assholes as we would. You know, which is a complete antithesis of how nature is supposed to work. If animals worked out of spite and anger, as we humans do, there would be no fucking way that the ecosystem would work as it does. Just think about it. In the movie, the bugs go all vengeful. You know, they wanna kill all humans. We're gonna kill you. Rah, rah, rah. We're gonna kill you. But that shit doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. When you get invasive species into a foreign environment, they are not called killer species. Well, some TV and media outlets might name them so. They are not like killer, vengeful. They are called invasive species. And they're called invasive species because they weren't supposed to be there. And all of these invasive species, all of these interventions came from us. You know, that is not how nature works. All of these fuck ups with nature and animals, they all came from us. It's us the one who fucked it up. So I hate when we pass this responsibility, even if it's just fiction, to animals. And all the human elements are completely forgotten. Like, this is so fucked. And I think a movie like this hides a lot of its responsibilities behind the fact that it's a movie for kids, that is not supposed to be that serious. But if you're not gonna treat this topic with the seriousness and responsibility that it deserves, I can't hold and I can be respectful or think about your movie in a serious way. You know, you can ask me to find the heart in a movie who is so heartless towards animals and nature and ultra super defensive on humans. You know, like, it's not just a piece of highway that is destroying the environment from the human side of it. It's not that. You know, it's the unhinged, unleashed, and predatory capitalism system that just wants to eat everything, and that is 100% human. That is 100% human. It's 100% us. You know, it's humans who want to build massive AI data centers and consume all the water. You know, it's humans who burn fossil fuels. It's humans who manipulate and exploit animals for their own gain without any discrimination. You know, it was human who brought many species into extinction. It's us. It's us. And a movie about nature can't ignore that fact. To me, it's massively irresponsible to ignore the fact that if nature is being fucked, it's being fucked by human hands and human actions. You know, that what does all of this criticism leads towards the movie? If you strip it down from, as I said at the beginning, this possibility of having an essence that is pro nature, let's take that out of it. Like, it's not. There's no way you find that in this movie, because of the portrayal of animals, because of the actions of the main characters. Right? There's no way this movie is pro animal. And if you take all of that, what do you get? a fucking generic trope heavy, basically. You know when they say Disney and Pixar movies are formulaic, this is it. This is it. Wacky characters, fun situations, but you know, that is the big shock with Hoppers. Like the big shock. Like the realization that just a generic trope filled Disney Pixar movie can be so praised and so critically acclaimed, 4 out of 4 stars. For what? Honestly, for what? You can see any real substance in this movie. Every character is plain, every character just follows one role, even the animals. And I keep thinking of how it tries to kind of like wedge some sort of deep animal analogy into it. And of course, the biggest one, and this is another tiny spoiler, but it's worth mentioning, is that out of all the main characters, when she meets them, one of them is a bear and the other one is another beaver. The bear is gonna eat the beaver, and the beaver is okay with it. And this dumb fucking kid is like, "You are okay with it? You're gonna let it eat you?" And the beaver says something that is so eye-opening, such a revelation. The beaver says like, "The bear caught me. I'm gonna be eaten." And it's not like in nature the survival instincts are forgotten and prey is always gonna try to run away. But you can only run away so much before you are caught by the predator and you are consumed to be fuel for the same ecosystem. And this dumb kid is like, "You're not gonna do anything, like, come on, man," like. And then the king explains like the general rules of nature. And rule number 1 is so fucked up. He says, if you have to eat, you just eat. Okay. If you gotta eat, you just eat. Tell me you don't see fucking Elon Musk or those fucking guys using that word. If you gotta eat, you just gotta eat. You eat everything. You eat the world, you eat freedom, you eat people. You eat, like, if you gotta eat, you just gotta eat. The law of the nature. That's fucked, man. But anyways, let's try to kind of like close the conversation here. It is super revealing to how Pixar and Disney make these movies once they make the big mistake of trying to tackle one issue that is more complex than their jokes and funny tidbits of a movie can attest to. The topic of nature and animals cannot be just made a joke out of it, or it can't just be made into like a tool to be used once and then discarded. The best Pixar movies, they always deal with human emotions and they always deal with humanity, even if they have a fantastic or a magical scenario. It's always about humanity. Soul deals with death and the soul, what happens after you die, but it's everything related to human connections. Inside Out, it's literally just human against human. It's the act of introspection. Elio, it's also about finding connection. This is not only with humans in this example, but with aliens and going abroad, and very abroad. Coco also deals with death, but they are all human emotions. They are all things that we don't owe anyone but ourselves to discover and to talk about. Let's talk about what it means to grow up in Inside Out. Let's talk what it means to feel. Let's talk what it means to feel anger. Let's talk about grief in Coco. You know, let's talk about abandonment in Elio. Let's talk about belonging in Luca. Let's talk about imagination in Toy Story. But then you say, let's talk about nature in Hoppers. Okay, can you really do it? Does any of the shit that happens in the movie reflect towards a commentary about our world's current state of nature and the human responsibility in it? You know, spoilers, by the fucking end of the movie, the whole human element is gone. The major goes like, okay, we're gonna find a way to finish the highway, but not going through the glade. That's everything. That's it. But it's so stupid, because if they could have done that from the beginning, why the fuck didn't they do it? And here's the tricky answer to that. If we project this to real life, you know why they didn't do it like that. You know why they didn't took the nature environment friendly option to do this highway. Say it with me. 3, 2, 1, money. They didn't do it because of money. Money, greed, capitalist consumption brought by humans. That is the subject that this movie will never tackle. That this movie will never recognize. It will be the culprit. That's a hard movie to pronounce. Culprit that will never shall be named. And for a movie about nature, that is just an insult. An insult to intelligence and an insult to the subject itself. So at the end of the day, I can't ever agree with the critics. This movie can be a 4 out of 4, can be a 5 out of 5. Doing that just shows that they won the battle of wits. Pixar, Disney, and the writers, they won. They discovered the formula. They show you that you are not watching. They show you that you are not paying attention. By giving you these weak-ass characters and this weak-ass plot, dealing with such an important subject as animals and nature, they are showing you that you are not paying attention. You know? How can you possibly defend? Let me know if you learned something about nature, animals, or conservationism at all by the plot and happenings of Hoppers. Fucking main character didn't even try to understand. She was trying to intervene and then make light out of all of it. What is the final big tension in Hoppers? Oh, my friend discovered that I lied. I'm sorry, friend. And the friend goes like, you're nice, man. I forgive you. Let's smoke some weed. Chill. That is the dramatic climax of the movie. which is obvious. Like you can even really call it a spoiler by the first half of the movie. You already seen it, right? She's pretending to be a beaver. Everybody believes she's a beaver, but she's a human. So eventually the big reveal that she's a human, the beavers are gonna go like, oh, she's a human, she lied to us. And then she goes like, I'm sorry, I lied to you because I wanted to save you, selfishly save you. You know, it's funny because and at no point in the movie, as I think I said before, maybe I said in my Spanish episode, they never um even not even imply that the animals in the glade are suffering or that they are dying, which also pisses me off. Let's do one final pisses me off. Why does she want to intervene? The ecosystem already moved somewhere else. It works. Nature works. You know? She should have known that if she was smart. You can at least say that if she were like a kid, like a really small kid, at least she would understand. You would understand her being so fucking dumb. But she's a college student. Maybe her major was like economics or something, and like she really had no idea what the fuck was she doing. One final thing about the movie: if you're gonna argue that this movie was about her grief for losing her grandma, or if you're gonna argue that it's gonna be about her feelings or emotions attached to this loss, or to the awkwardness of her as a social, like as a, how do you call that, like socially awkward person. If you're gonna argue that any of those elements are the main objective of the movie instead of nature, just go watch something else. If you wanna watch grief, go watch Coco. If you wanna watch, if you wanna watch, or I mean, talk about emotions, go watch Inside Out. If you wanna watch about belonging, go watch Elio. If you wanna watch or talk about family, go watch The Incredibles. You know, and in all of those movies, you're gonna find the same charm that apparently made this movie 5 out of 5 stars. You're gonna find the same one, all of that, because Pixar already mastered the formula. And well, fuck it. I ended up ranting more than I wanted to. If you notice, I tried to make a structure of describing the movie, making the argument about the search for a substance of essence, and then try to disprove it. But I ended up ranting anyways, because this movie, to me, if there's one word to describe this movie, is frustration. And if there's two words, it's frustration and irresponsibility. And if there's three words, it's frustration, irresponsibility, and fucking dumb protagonist character. Probably the worst main character in a Pixar movie ever, man. But anyways, that's my time. That's my rant. I'm gonna close with the same thought that I closed my Spanish episode. I hope that some new kid, some young aspiring kid sees hoppers, and we get a new Greta Thunberg, or like some new nature ecology fighter, a new animal defensor from all of this. I really hope so. That is the best thing I can hope so. But in such a shallow, unfocused, and overall to me irresponsible movie, It would be a miracle for that to happen. But miracles do happen. Or not miracles. Miracles is too religiously charged. Favorable coincidences. How about that? Not miracle, just favorable, positive coincidences. Which I wish for all of you out there in the world and in the wild. Even you bugs. All of you. I know Pixar wants to paint you as a bad guys, but I trust you. Don't kill me. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.